Okay, welcome in everybody. Welcome to the Ebony Star Network, and it is Ladies' Night. And I have two of my hosts with me here today. I have Dane Franklin and Abena, the Thunder Princess. And you have me, Creative Solutions, otherwise known as Charlene. And today's topic is childhood trauma shapes our world, whether we like it or not. So, I feel like this topic, everybody could relate to it, whether you're a man, a woman of different ages. And I think everybody is dealing with some kind of childhood trauma in their life. And whether they know it or not, some of their beliefs or limiting beliefs that they have could stem from childhood traumas that they have not healed and they haven't let go of. So today's topic is going to be a great topic. Hopefully, everybody tunes in and we all could learn something from this and we all could reminisce on something that happened in our past. And we are able to pinpoint those beliefs. And with that, we can let that go. With that being said, I'm going to have Dame and Abena come on in. I have a question for you guys. um, do you think a lot of these people in these spaces they have childhood traumas, particularly I want to say the men in the manosphere, the people who spit their venom and their vitriol, right? Do you guys think they have childhood trauma that they're battling inside?
Yeah, I don't think they have. I don't think they have a childhood trauma up to now. I don't think so.
Okay,
Okay,
what about
and
you, Jen?
I think they have trauma that they haven't dealt with, or they don't see it as trauma, or they don't recognize it as trauma. They thinking of is baggage from the past, which is another way of saying you have trauma or past experience, especially if you haven't let it go, you hadn't dealt with, it, or it keeps reoccurring in your life. So I think yes, they do, especially
Yes, go ahead.
especially since they seem to be on the same topic for years. So that means there's some kind of trauma there, or some kind of issue that they hadn't seek help to deal with. I think.
Okay, so I'm about to point fingers at people in this space. So if you're listening and you're tuning in, it is what it is. You put your business out there, so now we can talk about it. So I'm gonna talk about Obsidian, right? So I heard that Obsidian has been going around the YouTube spaces, through the grapevine. I heard that his like he's really mad at his mom because for during prom his mom these got two ladies to take him out to prom because nobody asked him to prom. And till this day he talks about it and he complains that nobody asked him out, nobody wanted to go with him, and his mother got two two girls to go with him, and he is still butthurt about it. And I want to fast forward to his life now. I don't know how old he is, but I'm assuming that he is in his early 50s, maybe approaching 60. The man is not married, as far as I'm concerned. I really don't know if he's dating anyone. But I'm going to assume, because the way he talks on the internet about black women, I'm going to just assume that he doesn't have a partner, right? Because if you're talking like that, chances are you really don't have a partner. So he goes around the internet spitting his venom, talking about black women. And let's fast forward to today. I feel like he still has that belief system, like he can't get women, or he can't get the woman he wants, or the woman that he wants does not like him. And I think that's a belief system that stuck with him. I don't want to quote or misquote him or anything like that, but when he talks to people and the way he talks, you kind of get that energy from him because he doesn't come from a loving place. When he comes into space, he comes to degrade any black woman he sees on the panel. He comes to talk down on all their talking points, right? And that's all he comes to do. It's like he wants to be the winner, and when he speak his rhetoric, he has other men, right, who probably went through these traumas, and then they latched on to what he's saying, and they kind of agree with him because them themselves have not healed from their trauma. So it's like most of these people in this space, they're trauma bonding, you can say. They're not really coming from a place where they like to do things together. I see them mostly trauma bond about the black community, about black women, and they don't really talk about anything productive per se. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that person. So that was one example. He talks about that. I know we have many examples of guys who hop on our panel and they talk about the women in their lives, and then they go back and unknowingly they tell us about their traumas and their childhood traumas. But they wouldn't know because they're not listening to what they're saying themselves. I feel like maybe we're like a therapy couch. I think so.
Yeah, but if it was really a therapy couch, they would be healing up by now, or at least making progress. Some of them have not moved or progress, or would they assume it's progress is still another, it's her fault. It's her fault, her fault, her fault, her fault, her fault, his fault, her fault, his fault, her fault, his fault. But, mhm, but they don't deal with the real issue. They're too busy hiding, covering, pointing in another direction.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, and I just wanted to say not only men deal with childhood trauma, women deal with childhood trauma also. And it does affect you when you get older because when you grow up in certain situations, you kind of believe those things, to be true because it creates a familiar environment, and it's kind of hard to get out of the familiar and get past that and go into the unknown because it could be uncomfortable and not something that you're used to. So I want to say that both people deal with this, men and women. So we're not here to pinpoint fingers, but we do have to call out the stuff that we see in the space because it affects us.
Yeah, yeah. And now people are responding to trauma that ain't theirs like it's theirs. Um, we have people who have never experienced those traumas or those situations, but yet they're projecting their trauma bonded brother uh, uh, issues like it's theirs. So it's spreading. Hmm.
And I just want to say, like, if you have these traumas and you don't overcome them, you're not living a fulfilling life because you're always thinking about what people think about you. Hold on, I have it right here. So you have it affects your emotional health, your mental health, and your physical health. So you'll always have these feelings of anxiety, worry, shame, guilt, hopelessness, grief, sadness, and anger. Also, people who are surviving trauma, they have higher rates of anxiety, depression, suicide, self-harm, PTSD, drug and alcohol misuse, and relationship difficulties. And then also physical health. Children who are exposed to abuse and trauma may develop what is called a heightened stress response. This can impact their ability to regulate their emotions lead to sleep difficulties, lower immune functions, increase the risk of a number of physical illnesses throughout adulthood. And just plain old stress. If you have stress in the body, stress in the system, you're more prone to diseases, you're more prone to your body becoming attacked, and chances are you can get cancer early in your life also, because your body is suppressed, because your cells, everything is feeling that emotion of that childhood trauma, that helplessness. You're feeling down, your spirits are low, and overall it's gonna have an effect on your body. So this is something that's real, and we got to talk about it. So I think Dame is getting ready to play one of a really good video. So I'm gonna turn over to Dame, and she's gonna go over the copyright.
All right. Let's cover our bases. This channel may contain content not authorized for use by its owner. However, according to Section 107 of the Copyright Act of the United States, the fair use, I repeat, the fair use of copyrighted work for purposes such as criticism, definitely, comments, assuredly, news reporting, only for those who don't know, teaching. We're going to learn something new today. Scholarship or research is not an infringement of copyright. Okay, so what Charlene said they had discovered is true, and I want you to hear from people that have some of the people that have done the research on this about how it affects children, and then later on how this um, worked as an adult. Here we go.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
Okay, so so I've seen some of this in children. You know, some of it I couldn't understand at the time, and I had to talk to others. You know, the neglect, something as simple as um not not having the attention of the parent, or even the parent of the same sex. It makes a difference. You know, um, um, usually they want attention, even negative attention, because it's attention. You know, even if it comes negatively, is all positive because I got your attention now, which creates a vicious cycle of them doing more negative stuff to get your attention. Um, Abuse. I've seen anxiety. I've seen a shutdown. The I don't care, you know, shut down, or they internalize, or they go inward a lot, and and most of the time you have no idea what's going on. You just know that they don't care, and you kind of give up trying to find out or push, and so it's too easy for them to get lost in the shuffle, um, as they concentrate on it. Basically, the children be in survival mode. hmm that go through these different forms of traumas. Sometimes it's not all always physical abuse. It could be neglect, emotional.
I was gonna say that's true. That's why some kids act out in school. That's why some kids are, considered like, they're misbehaving, mischievous. It's all because they're looking for love and attention, and they're not getting it at home. So Also, as also in life, that's why people are class clowns. That's why people do certain things because they did not get what they needed when they were younger. So now they feel like they need that this is something that they have to have to fulfill that need. They got to fill that void inside.
Mhm. Yeah, and it makes you wonder what happens as they become an adult. If they get the help that they need to go through these hurdles that they went through, and they can relearn. As you can see, they were saying if the child gets help and support, and you know, and therapy and what they need, they can recover. But what happens if they went through childhood without that and they become adults? You know, um, we okay. According to some information, quite a few of us have at least one form of a trauma or another, even if we don't see it as trauma. Is there. The some of them are discovering that, and they ask you certain questions, and it also leads to not just mental health problems, but it also leads to physical medical health problems, and they're making the connections there too. hmm so 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 how this topic came about initially was over a question about relationship and and and, and choosing a spouse, and one of the things was get to know the person's family and how they grew up and stuff like that. And somebody had presented that, well, there could be trauma there, and they ain't gonna want to talk about it, or you could, or that gonna be hard for them to talk about. And I was stating that it's even more urgent than ever because trauma don't just go away on its own without some help, and it's gonna show itself up sooner or later in the relationship.
And then I was gonna say, if you don't heal these traumas, like that's why some people they seem normal as kids, and all of a sudden, like as soon as they get to their teenage years, you see something. All of a sudden, they become bipolar, or they become that or something else. Is because they be battling with things that happened to them also when they were younger, or it's a buildup of a lot of things, and sometimes like their mind is in flight mode, fight or flight. So all of that is very relative because you don't know if you can trigger somebody, and you don't know what the hell will happen. One day the person is nice, and the next day something happened, they get triggered, and then you see somebody throwing glass across the room. Like it could get that scary.
hmm
It can.
hmm
So, yeah, this is just if you have kids out there, protect your kids, love on your kids. I mean, if the other parent is not, I wouldn't say productive, but if they're not healthy and their situation isn't healthy, and you know they're not healthy, chances are that the child's probably better off in a single parent household. Whether we want to say two parents are better than one, in these cases, that's not always likely the case.
hmm And in cases of the other parent is not um, as involved or interested or you know uh, into involved as a parent as you have to get a support system for your child, because they're gonna feel the lack of that other parent, and so you need a support system in place so they can form good and healthy relationships, because part of this problem is it makes it hard to form relationships, or healthy relationships, or even to recognize it, or they have some kind of issue. hmm So when they say, so the reason, part of the reason why it says it takes a village, it means because there's a support. If something falls away, there's a support there to take up the slack. And you're and since our community is kind of broken, you kind of have to recreate your community, your support system. Uh-huh. But with married couples, they have a support system. You know, they not married couples are not in it alone. It's just the husband and the wife. It's everybody, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the friends, the godparents, you name it. Those are all part of the support system. And 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 this mentality of you on your own is creating a lot of issues, because without the support, without the help, there's no healing. And there's too many of us walking around unhealed, unacknowledged, or don't even recognize or even know they have a trauma, until something comes up that, triggered them. And sometimes they're not even aware that they triggered, or they so used to being triggered. You hear terms like "you're just like my ex," or or the phrases "why I keep attracting these same people," or something like that. It could be, or "why I'm so uncomfortable when I'm in a good place or have a good relationship." It's because you're so used to the trauma. The trauma is now normal, or the thing, and it's your familiar. It's your familiar, and so anything that's outside of that doesn't seem right, or it makes you nervous, or it makes you scared because it's an unknown. Hmm. That's all I got to say for that for right now.
Oh, okay. um, I'm gonna just touch on this one. The 9 steps, and then we can move on to the video of what happened. Some people talked on it. The 9 steps to healing childhood trauma as an adult. I was looking this over, and I'm like, just to let you know, there are different ways to heal childhood trauma. You can do shadow work. You can write down things that happened to you in your past, and you can reflect on it. You can let it go. You can meditate and visualize yourself as a child and giving that child love. There's a lot of ways you can heal this, and it is not a one. You do it once and it heals all the time. I think you have to continuously do it and overcome, so that you don't get triggered as much. So I was like going over this, and I think this one is good. But again, you can feel free to look online. There's YouTube videos on it. You don't have to follow exactly what we say, but this is just some things that we're gonna go over. So this is an article by Libby Ma. It's called 9 Steps of Healing Childhood Trauma as an Adult. And all she is saying is you need to ground it. So basically sit down at a quiet place, journal, think about it, think about things that happened to you. Because sometimes all of a sudden somebody said something to you, or you hear about a situation, and then all of a sudden you're triggered. So it says take deep breaths. So ground yourself, find somewhere nice and quiet and peaceful. Recall what happened to you. Actually go through it in your head, visualize it, sense it. So name what happened to you. Name it as an emotion of like shame, guilt, the way you felt. So you need to name the emotion, so that when these things come up, you know where this emotion came from. Then it said is to love it. So know that this happened to you. I mean, you can't change it. This made you be who you are. So embrace it. Receive the messages of wisdom. So after you went through something traumatic, now you learn what to do and what not to do. Or in some cases, you learn how you can become a better parent, a better person, how you can be wary of different situations, on how to overcome them, depending on what happened to you. And I'm not every most things are not your fault. And you want people to understand that it is not your fault. So you don't take that on. Share it. So tell other people about what happened to you so that you let it out and then let it go. So you have experienced it and then you just let it go. So it'll still trigger you, but not so much because you know it happened to you. You accepted it, and it doesn't bother you as much because you already accepted it and you made peace with it. So yeah. All right. So let's go into the video, Dane.
Okay. And if you're still struggling with it, there's nothing wrong with seeking therapy and help. Because it's not always easy to get over. It takes time. Okay. Now this video I'm gonna show is talking about, okay, we was talking about some of the mental uh um uh the mental situations for the children, what happens when they go through these traumas. Okay, now we're going to get into how it affects your health and over a lifetime. So we're going to hear from this doctor and hear what she has to say about that and what she discovered.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health-damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, when we know not only which pathways are disrupted, but how, then as doctors, it is our job to use this science for prevention and treatment. That's what we do. So in San Francisco, we created the Center for Youth Wellness to prevent, screen, and heal the impacts of ACEs and toxic stress. We started simply with routine screening of every one of our kids at their regular physical, because I know that if my patient has an ACE score of 4, she's 2.5 times as likely to develop hepatitis or COPD. She's 4.5 times as likely to become depressed, and she's 12 times as likely to attempt to take her own life as my patient with 0 ACEs. I know that when she's in my exam room. For our patients who do screen positive, we have a multidisciplinary treatment team that works to reduce the dose of adversity and treat symptoms using best practices, including home visits, care coordination, mental health care, nutrition, holistic interventions, and yes, medication when necessary. But we also educate parents about the impact of ACEs and toxic stress the same way you would for covering electrical outlets or lead poisoning. And we tailor the care of our asthmatics and our diabetics in a way that recognizes that they may need more aggressive treatment given the changes to their hormonal and immune systems. So the other thing that happens when you understand this science is that you'll want to shout it from the rooftops, because this isn't just an issue for kids in Bayview. I figured the minute that everybody else heard about this, it would be routine screening, multidisciplinary treatment teams, and it would be a race to the most effective clinical treatment protocols. Yeah, that did not happen. And that was a huge learning for me.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Everybody, apologize for the show. I have to stop it. It looks like we have been put a stop to. I guess I let that video play too long. I apologize. We'll finish this up another time. So this
Are
was
we back on the air?
no. We're off the air. The stream is unavailable. Okay.
We're still off the air?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They'll put it back. They have us come back on usually.
No. This it says the stream is unavailable. All right.
Oh, I see it.
So for those of y'all who was interested in this TED Talk, This is how childhood trauma affects health across lifetime. Nadine Burks Harris. If y'all wanted to finish it in TED Talks. All right, I'm gonna have to end the show. I'm sorry, y'all.
Are
Okay.
we gonna go back live or what's gonna happen?
I gotta see we gotta see what's going on.
All
If
right.
it could be meditate. We'll be back if make corrections that we made. I apologize to everyone. Y'all have a good night.